Imagine you are standing in front of a giant castle. This castle is called Buckingham Palace. It has huge iron gates that are very heavy and very old. These gates have been there for hundreds of years. They have stayed strong while big wars were happening. They have stayed closed when kings and queens had big secrets they didn't want anyone to know. These gates never break and they never tell anyone what they have seen. They are like giant, silent guards, but right now something is different. Something inside those big stone walls has finally cracked. People are starting to talk, and the news is spreading fast. It is like a small earthquake is shaking the most powerful royal house in the whole world. King Charles III has just made a choice that is very surprising. It happened so fast, and it was a very personal choice for him. People who watch the royal family are calling it one of the most exciting things to happen in modern history. This choice didn't happen on the news with cameras flashing. It didn't come from a secret paper that was leaked to the internet. It wasn't told to the world by a person reading a speech. Instead, it happened behind doors that were shut tight. It happened in a room where only the most important people for the future of the crown were allowed to be. When the meeting was over, a queen consort had her titles taken away. She was told she couldn't do her special jobs anymore. She was even sent away from the very palace she had worked her whole life to get into. Why did this happen? It all started with a single piece of jewelry hidden in a secret box. It started with a phone call in the middle of the night. And it started with 2 secret diaries that were never, ever supposed to be touched by anyone. Stay with us as we tell you this story because it is much bigger than any headline you will see. Every little detail is very important. Before we talk about what happened, we need to understand why everything was so important. We have to look back at Queen Elizabeth II. She left behind a very big legacy. A legacy is like a long trail of good work that people remember you for. She was the queen for 70 years. That is a very, very long time. She wasn't just a lady with a crown, she was like the heart of the whole royal family. She wore the crown through very hard times. She stayed strong when her husband died. She stayed strong when her children were arguing in public. She stayed strong even when people in the world stopped trusting the royal family. The world never stopped watching her. People were always judging her and asking her to do more than any human could do. When she finally passed away, she left behind a throne, but she also left behind a giant collection of things. She had jewelry that she wore at the biggest parties in history. She had letters she wrote when very important things were happening in the country. She had private things that had her fingerprints on them from 70 years of doing her duty. These items didn't just belong to her family. They belonged to the history of all the people in England. There are very strict rules about these things. These rules are part of the Royal Collection Trust. The rules say that the most personal items must be locked in a very strong vault. A vault is like a giant, super-safe closet made of thick metal. These items were supposed to stay untouched for almost 100 years. They were not supposed to be moved or looked at by anyone in the royal family until a whole new century started. This wasn't just boring paperwork. It was a promise. It was a promise that the Queen's private voice would only be heard by the people she wanted at the exact right time. That is the most important part of this story. You must remember this promise, because everything that happened next was a way of breaking it on purpose. It was a normal Tuesday morning in early May of the year 2025. A man named Donald Walton arrived at the palace. His job is being the royal treasurer. That means he is in charge of taking care of the royal money and treasures. He was carrying a brown leather folder under his arm. He was there to do a routine audit. An audit is just a fancy word for a checkup. He had to go into the treasury and make sure every single item was in its right place. Usually, this is very boring work. No one writes news stories about it, and there are no cameras. It is just careful work to make sure nothing is lost. But this time, something was very wrong. When Donald Walton went into the secret metal vault, he found out that some things were missing. They weren't just moved to a different shelf. They weren't being cleaned or shown in a museum. They were simply gone, and the things that were gone were not small or unimportant. They were some of the most famous treasures in the world. The first thing that was missing was the sapphire Jubilee brooch. This is a very special piece of jewelry. Queen Elizabeth wore it when she celebrated 65 years of being the queen. It has a giant blue sapphire in the middle and very pretty diamonds around it. It was photographed at one of the most important moments for the royal family. It wasn't just a pretty pin sitting in a drawer. It was a symbol of the crown itself. When Donald saw it was missing, he was very worried. The second missing item made everyone feel very cold and sad. It was a necklace made of 2 strands of pearls. Queen Elizabeth had worn these pearls on one of the saddest days anyone can remember. She wore them at the funeral of Princess Diana in 1997. Think about how important that is. That necklace was worn during a time when the whole country was crying and saying goodbye. It wasn't just worth a lot of money. It had a special feeling attached to it that you cannot put a price on. But even though the brooch and the necklace were very important, they were not the most scary things to be missing. Inside that vault, there were also 2 old books. These books were bound in soft leather. They were the Queen's private journals. The moment Donald Walton realized those journals were gone, the whole story changed. It wasn't just about missing jewelry anymore. It was about something much more serious. Those journals were never supposed to be opened by anyone alive today. They were not official records for history books. They were not diaries that the palace workers kept track of. They were something much more private and much more dangerous. These journals were the handwritten thoughts of Queen Elizabeth. She wrote them during a very hard time for everyone in the world, the global lockdown. During those months when she was alone and couldn't see many people, she sat with her thoughts. She wrote about the heavy weight of being a queen. She wrote about how it felt to lose people she loved. She wrote about how hard it was to keep the royal family important in a world that was changing so fast. These were her most private thoughts. She even wrote personal letters to the people who would be the next kings. These were words written by a woman who knew she was in the final part of her long life. She was sitting alone with her pen and her paper during one of the strangest times in history. According to the laws of the Royal Collection Trust, those journals were supposed to stay sealed for almost 100 years. They weren't supposed to be opened until the year 2122. Queen Elizabeth wanted those pages to be read by people who weren't even born yet. She wanted them to be read by a future generation who could look back with a fresh perspective. That was her dying wish. It was also the law, but someone had decided to break both the wish and the law. Donald Walton closed his folder and told the important people at the palace right away. Very quickly, the word missing was replaced by a much scarier word: stolen. This is where the story gets really crazy. This wasn't a normal robbery. Usually when something is stolen, a window is broken or an alarm goes off. But in this case, no locks were broken. No alarms started ringing. No glass was shattered on the floor. The big, strong vault doors had opened perfectly. They opened exactly how they were supposed to when someone with the right permission came near them. This meant only one thing: someone who was allowed to be in the palace had helped steal the items. King Charles had to act very fast. He ordered a secret investigation. He put a man named Sir Clement Meister in charge. Sir Clement is a very smart man who used to work in intelligence. He has worked for the royal family for a long time and they trust him very much. The king told him to find out what happened, how it happened, and exactly who did it. The first big clue came from the security records. These records show who goes in and out of every door. On the night of April 27th, the records showed that a guard named Robert Halton went into the treasury area. He went in at 3:49 in the morning. That was 2 hours before he was even supposed to start working. There was no good reason for him to be in that secret area in the middle of the night. When the investigators talked to the guard, he tried to say he didn't do anything. He said everything was normal, but the investigators were very careful and they asked him many questions. Finally, Robert Halton told the truth. He said he went into the vault because someone called him on an internal palace phone. The person who called him knew very private things about his life. They knew about his family. They knew that his wife was sick and that he needed money to pay for her medicine. The caller acted like they were a big boss in the palace. They promised to help him with his money problems if he did what they asked. Robert said he thought he was following a real order from a boss. He said he never actually took the things himself. We have to wonder if he is telling the whole truth, but the next detail is what really changed everything. Sir Clement's team traced that phone call. They wanted to see where it came from. The call didn't come from outside the palace. It wasn't from a stranger's cell phone. The signal came directly from the private wing of the palace where the royal family lives. It came from the area used by Queen Camilla. Think about how serious that is. A secret phone call in the middle of the night came from the Queen's private rooms. A guard was tricked into opening a high-security vault. Very old and important treasures were taken away in the dark. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. It had a much more serious name. Then a lady named Eleanor Hartridge found something. Eleanor is a worker at the palace. She had worked in Camilla's private rooms for many years. She knew every inch of those rooms. She knew every drawer and every closet. She was just doing her normal job of cleaning a bedroom in that wing. While she was tidying up, she saw something that looked a bit weird. It was a jewelry box shaped like a rabbit. It had been pushed under a large wardrobe. It was sitting crooked like it had been hidden in a hurry. At first, it looked like a harmless decoration. But Eleanor decided to pick it up. She was surprised because it was much heavier than it looked. As she held it in the sunlight coming through the window, she saw a tiny line along the bottom. Her hands were shaking as she pressed on the lining. Suddenly, the bottom of the box clicked open. It was a secret compartment. Inside, there was a small bundle wrapped up carefully. When she opened the wrap, there it was, the sapphire Jubilee brooch. There was no doubt about it. It was the same blue sapphire that was missing from the vault. It was hidden in a secret part of a box, in a bedroom, in Queen Camilla's private wing. That brooch was about to be put on a desk between a king and his wife. King Charles did not call the news. He didn't have a big meeting with his helpers. He didn't make a public statement. Instead, he did something much more direct. He sent a message to Camilla. He asked her to come to his private study. About 20 minutes later, she walked into the room. It was very quiet. Only one lamp was turned on. On the desk between them sat the sapphire Jubilee brooch. People who were nearby say that Camilla looked at the brooch right away. Her face changed. She looked like she realized she had been caught. King Charles was very calm. He didn't yell or get angry. He asked one very serious question. He asked how that brooch got into her room, but Charles already knew the answer. He knew the phone call had been traced to her wing. He knew the guard had opened the vault. He knew what the maid had found under the wardrobe. The question wasn't really about getting information. It was about deciding what to do next. And what happened next was a meeting that would change the royal family forever. Later that afternoon, the heavy doors of the palace war room were closed. 5 people were inside: King Charles, Prince William, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Queen Camilla. This room has seen many big decisions in history, but this one was very special. King Charles showed everyone the evidence. He talked about the missing items. He talked about the audit. He talked about the guard who went into the vault at night. He talked about the phone call from Camilla's wing. He told them every detail very carefully. He wasn't acting like a man who was mean. He was acting like a king who had spent 10 days learning the facts. He now had the power to decide what would happen. Camilla listened to him. When it was her turn to speak, she said she didn't steal anything. She said the sapphire brooch was promised to her a long time ago. She said Queen Elizabeth had told her in private that she could have it one day. She called it a personal understanding between 2 women. She said she was just taking what was supposed to be hers. The room was silent after she said that. Then they started talking about the journals. The jewelry was one thing, but the journals were different. There was no way to say they were a gift. Camilla admitted that she took the journals. She didn't try to deny it, but she said she didn't take them for herself. She said she took them for protection. Camilla said she took the journals because she was afraid of what was written inside them. She said that in the Queen's final months, she had written about her worries for the royal family. She had written about her doubts. Camilla argued that if people read those words in the future, it might make the royal family look bad. It might cause a big controversy for King Charles many years from now. She said that because no one would be alive then to explain what was happening, the words could be misunderstood. She claimed she wasn't trying to be selfish. She claimed she was being loyal to her husband. She wanted to protect his reign from any trouble that might come from the Queen's private thoughts. Now we have to stop and think about this. Is it okay to sneak into a secret vault at night and take things? Is it okay to trick a guard and hide things in a secret box? Can you really call that loyalty? There is a big difference between trying to protect someone and being afraid for yourself. Which one was the real reason? That is what the people in that room were wondering. Prince William looked very serious. Princess Anne was very quiet and her face was like stone. Everyone could see the truth. This wasn't an accident. It was a plan that was carried out in secret, away from all the rules. It wasn't a small mistake. It was a choice. King Charles stood up slowly from his chair. The people in the room said he looked very serious and heavy, like he was carrying a big weight. He reminded everyone about the laws. He said that Queen Elizabeth's private things were protected by the law. Nothing was supposed to be touched for 100 years. Not the jewels, not the letters, and definitely not her diaries. He didn't raise his voice. He said that a private promise between 2 people is not as important as the law of the country. He said that secret phone calls and hidden boxes are not the way to do things in the palace. He said that no one person has the right to decide which parts of history should be kept and which parts should be hidden. The whole room was completely silent. Then King Charles gave his ruling. He said that, starting right now, Queen Camilla was removed from her ceremonial duties. She was no longer going to have her military titles. She couldn't go to any more royal parties or events. She had no power to represent the crown anymore. She also wouldn't have any claim to the Queen's treasures in the future. None of her family members would be allowed to have those items either. Then he said something very important. He said that the royal family only lasts if people trust them. When that trust is broken inside the palace walls, it puts the whole crown at risk. No one argued with him. No one said a word. The choice was very painful for Charles because he was choosing his duty as a king over his own marriage. In that moment, history changed. The next morning, the sky over London was gray and heavy. Tourists were standing outside the palace gates with their cameras. They had no idea that a huge change had just happened inside. Very early in the morning, Camilla left Buckingham Palace. She was moved to Ray Mill House. This is her private home in a place called Wiltshire. She was moved very quietly. There was no big ceremony to say goodbye. There was no news story at the time, but things started to change right away. Her name was taken off the Royal Circular. This is the list of which royal family members are doing work. Her future meetings were cancelled. Within 3 days, the charities she helped got letters. The letters said that their relationship with the royal family would have to be checked again. Many of those partnerships were stopped immediately. The night before she left, King Charles had talked to the country on TV. He had recorded a message from his study. He said that the missing items had been found. He said that someone in his house had been punished for breaking the royal rules. He never said Camilla's name, but he didn't have to. Everyone knew who he was talking about. Very quickly, the news was full of headlines. People were arguing. Some said it was right to hold her accountable. Others said it was a very sad tragedy. Many people were shocked. They had just started to like Camilla as the queen consort. Now that role was gone in just one night. But even though everyone was talking about Camilla, the biggest mystery was still the journals. Once the jewelry was back, everyone inside the palace was thinking about the books. There were 2 volumes written in the queen's own handwriting. They were written during the lockdown. They had private letters to her heirs. They had her thoughts about duty and loss. These weren't for a museum. They were the honest voice of a woman who gave her whole life to her job. She wrote them without thinking anyone would read them while people she knew were still alive. According to Camilla, the journals had doubts about the future of the royal family. They were so important that Camilla was willing to risk her whole life as a queen to keep them secret. What was she so afraid of? That is the big question. Did Camilla actually read the journals? Did she see something that scared her? Or did she just guess that they might be bad? The answer to that question changes how we think about her. If she read them, she was trying to hide the truth. If she didn't read them, she was acting out of fear of what might be there. Either way, someone had broken into the vault to keep those words hidden. The journals were eventually checked to make sure they were real. Sir Clement Meister watched over the whole process. Once they were sure they were the real books, they were put back into the vault. This time, the security was much higher. There were new digital codes for the locks. Only 2 people know the new codes, King Charles and Prince William. The sound of the vault doors closing was very loud in the quiet halls. It felt very final. It meant that the physical items were safe, and so was all the worry from the last 11 days. The brooch was safe. The necklace was safe. The journals were back where they belonged, but people in the palace were still whispering. They wondered what was written on those pages. Some thought the queen wrote about who should be the next king. Others thought she wrote about family fights. Others wondered if she thought the royal family would still be around in the future. No one will know for sure for a very long time. But what Camilla did changed everything. Before this, the journals were just part of the future. Now they are a giant question that no one can answer. In the days after Camilla left, the palace was very quiet. Prince William stayed very close to his father. He wanted to show everyone that the family was still strong and together. Princess Anne kept doing her work and looking very calm. King Charles moved through the halls with a lot of strength. He didn't celebrate what happened. He didn't look happy that it was over. He had protected the crown, but it cost him a lot. Letters started coming in from all over the country. Thousands of people sent emails and notes. They said they were glad the king was following the rules. They said it showed that the monarchy is not above the law, but inside the palace there was no feeling of winning. Every step felt heavier. The pictures of old kings and queens on the walls seemed to be watching everything. Charles was dealing with a very hard choice. Every king or queen has to balance being a family member and doing their duty. Every choice a king makes affects more than just the people in the castle. It affects the whole future. As the sun went down over London, King Charles stood alone in the Queen's private chapel. The colors from the windows made long shadows on the floor. Prince William let his father be alone. The vault was locked. The codes were secret. The journals were waiting for 100 years to pass. The weight of the last 11 days was very heavy. Everything had been done to save something older and bigger than any one person. But even when you do the right thing, it can still hurt. It is very sad to know that the person who broke the trust wasn't a stranger. It was someone he loved. That choice will be remembered forever. The events that happened in May 2025 will be studied by people for many years. They represent a very rare moment when we got to see how the royal family works on the inside. We saw that the rules are important even for the people at the top. A single jewel and some secret diaries started a giant crisis. The monarchy had to face its own limits in a very personal way. The response showed us a lot about King Charles. He doesn't make choices based on his feelings. He makes choices based on what is right. The sapphire brooch is back in the collection. The pearl necklace is back where it belongs. The vault is locked tight. Queen Camilla is at her private house in Wiltshire. That house used to be a place for her to relax, but now it is a place where she is separated from the palace. She is far away from the role she worked her whole life to have. No one knows how long she will be there. The palace says the situation is indefinite, which means it has no end date yet. But the story that people will remember most is the story of the two leather journals sitting in the dark behind steel doors. Queen Elizabeth wrote those books with honesty. She wrote to her heirs. She wrote for people who would live a long time after the problems of today are gone. She chose to be more honest in writing than she could ever be in public. Someone was very afraid of that honesty. The journals are locked until the year 2122. The people who open them then will not remember 2025. They won't feel the same things the royal family feels today. They will just read the private thoughts of a queen. They will hear her voice exactly how she wanted. Was King Charles right to send his wife away? Most people would say he was. Was Camilla wrong to take the things? The law says she was. But was she right to be afraid? Could those words really change how the world sees the royal family? No vault code can answer that. It will stay a secret for 100 years. For now, the palace goes back to its normal routine. Corridors have their normal sounds, but inside there is still a big question. What did Queen Elizabeth know? What did she write? And what will the world find a century from now? We won't be here to find out, but we will keep watching. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe. The story of the royal family in 2025 is not over yet. What do you think? Did King Charles do the right thing? Was Camilla trying to help, or was she just scared? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. We will see you in the next video.